All right, OLR exclusive fans, we are on the line with none other than Tony Craig. How are you, Tony?
I'm fantastic. How you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. All right, so I know you are a very, very busy man, so I'm going to get this interview on the go.
Okay.
All right, so you were born in Trinidad. Can you tell us what the environment is like in Trinidad as opposed to Canada, and what made you make the move to Canada?
The environment you're talking from a performing artist standpoint?
Like do they get snow there, or is it like all sand?
no, we don't get snow there. It's 95 degrees all the time, and when it's not 95 degrees and sunny, it's raining. Bucket is rough, as we call it in the Caribbean. So yeah, usually leading up to, I think it's around this time would be the rainy season. No, we're in the tropics, and it was a real shock to me coming to Canada way back in the late 70s. And I joked about it many times in other interviews that ice falling from the sky. It was a real shock, and the novelty wore pretty quickly. I mean, from the tropics, but I had made many trips here before. Prior to moving here in late '77, playing, as you know, I'm a musician, and we would tour, come here for the Caravana, go to New York for Labor Day, Miami, LA, Winnipeg, anywhere there was a Caribbean festival, we would come and perform. Particularly in Toronto was particularly nice because, for some reason I felt more of an affinity for Toronto or Canada than I did anywhere in the States. And so it was a lot easier for me to come back and settle here. But I needed to make the move because I wanted to play. I wanted to play with famous musicians that I idolize and, spend many years as a young musician, listening to and wanting to play with. And as the soca and calypso music, it's great, but it's a sort of a seasonal thing in many cases. Even down there, after the carnival season, you don't hear even now, a lot of calypso and soca music all of the time. There's a lot of Jamaican dance hall and a lot of that stuff, R&B that happens during the rest of the year. And when carnival time comes, it's more dominant. And so as a young musician who were, more ambitious and wanted to play a lot of different types of music, it's not an environment that you can do that and excel. There's not much of a market for it. It's almost like at least back in those days, a bit of a novelty. So that sort of really prompted me to make the move, and that was my primary reason. And in fact, we were here. So I moved in October, I believe, of '77. Came back. So we were here for Caravan, I think, '75, '76, '77. I was playing with the Troubadours. That's the Mighty Sparrow and the Troubadours and all these different bands. And we went back and we were doing the shows down there. And I just decided, you know what? It's time. It's time to make that move. And I got on the plane one Sunday afternoon and I came back. And like they say, the rest is history. So
Nice. So it was just
yeah.
a kind of, you had your dream and you knew, what you needed to do to, I guess, make that dream come true.
Yeah, that's kind of like what it was. As a young musician, you do have dreams and you have aspirations of playing with famous people, and it's really starting to get into the jazz and the fusion at that time. As you know, in the late '70s, jazz fusion was a big deal, as well as the R&B, listening to Earth, Wind and Fire and the Commodores and all those bands, and you dream of one day being able to play with artists like that. And I knew I would never be able to do that there, even though we played a lot of those cover songs and things like that from time to time. But it, no one ever really took it that serious. But some of my fellow musicians that I played with down there, and we grew up together, played together down there, and we basically moved here roughly the same time. I don't know if you know a gentleman by the name of Tony Springer. He's known as Wild Tea and the Spirits. He does Jimi Hendrix, I guess, revival, I guess you can call it. You look at it, and he's an amazing player. He played with me with Carol Pope and Rough Trade and other bands, but he's also from Trinidad. And we're like brothers, and we played down there together. And roughly the same time that I came up here, he also came. As a matter of fact, he was here with another band. And I actually introduced him to the girl that he ended up marrying, Brenda. And he ended up coming back as well. Yeah. So if you ever have a chance to look up my brother, Tony Springer, also known as Wild Tea and the Spirits, he's an awesome, awesome guitar player. He played with David Bowie after we left Rough Trade together, and a bunch of other major artists as well. He's an amazing guy, and he's my soul brother from another mother way back in the day. He's a little older than me in terms of age, but we're roughly the same generation.
Nice. I will definitely look him up and give him a listen.
In fact, get him on there and interview him. Get an interview with him. He would probably repeat the same thing I just said to you. So we came a long way. It's interesting because we played. We used to do a lot of. We were both session players back in the day down there, playing jingles and things back in Trinidad, way back in the late '70s, and we're playing different bands together. And then we came here together, and then we ended up playing with Rough Trade together. An amazing history. So he might be a good guy for you to get on your program and have a conversation with. He has a lot of interesting stories.
I will definitely look into that. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. And then, so as you mentioned, you started with music. You've performed live on stage with people like Etta James, Benny King, and Martha Reeves. You've also recorded albums with people like Eddie Schwartz, Carol Pope, and Rough Trade Dan Hill. Can you tell us what those experiences were like and how they came to be?
It came to be starting in the early '80s. Another gentleman by the name of George Oliver, a local singer, R&B singer here. I was playing with him and Bobby DuPont with a band called the Royals. And they got a call from a gentleman named Sid Markowitz, who was putting together a revival of the Club Blue Note, which I don't know if you know the history of the Club Blue Note, but apparently this is well before my days in Toronto. Club Blue Note was an R&B club. I think it was located at Yonge and Gerrard or something like that downtown Toronto. And this is where all of the Motown people came to perform, like, the Supremes, Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, and everyone, including Martha Reeves and Etta James and all the others, back in the 60s. And in the early 80s, they decided to have a revival of it, or have a rebirth of the Blue Note, right, which was an R&B club. And so they tapped George to be the house band, and he needed to put a band together. At the time, we were playing with the Royals together, and he asked me, he said, "I want you to help me put a band together because we're doing this club called the Blue Note, and blah blah blah, and we need a kick-ass band to put together. You get horns, and I want you to find a bass player you love to play with." And they recommended my other brother from another mother, Howard A., the bass player, played with me with Rough Trade. As a matter of fact, he got me into Rough Trade. And so we put this band together, and we were the house band for the Blue Note. And that club became the premier place for R&B music in the early to mid 80s. It was so amazing that there would be a line. We would open 6 days a week, and it was so successful. There would be lineups around the corner, and they decided to open every day of the week, Sunday to Sunday.
Wow.
And so, and the format of the club is where we would play some original, we'd play a few sections of music, of original songs and cover songs and R&B stuff. And every week, sometimes for 2 weeks at a time, they would have a special guest artist. And they were all Motown people, including the Etta James and the Martharies, the Benny King and the Simon Dave and the Solomon Burke and the Mary Wells and the Supremes and all of these people. And so they would bring them back and they would perform for a week or sometimes 2 weeks at a time as their special guest artists. And that's where I got to play with many of them. However, some of them, like Etta James, for example, she also visited Toronto at other times during the same period where she'd play at Albert's Hall and do concerts at different concert halls. And she decided that Tony Gregg was the drummer she wanted behind her whenever she came to Toronto, beyond what we did at the Blue Note. And so every time she came to the city, she would request me to be her drummer.
Nice.
And that's how most of that came to be. And periodically, I would sub out of that club and go play with Carol Pope. That's how I ended up doing a couple of albums with Carol Pope. It's all interconnected. And then turns out they were revamping their own band. And Howard, who was originally playing with Carol, insisted that he wanted to play with me. And so Carol and Kevin hired me. And then we were looking for a guitar player that had the R&B chops but had that rock edge. And guess who? Tony Springer came to mind. And so we're all, other than Carol and Kevin, we were rough trade for about 3 or 4 years. All black man playing R&B rock music. We did our last farewell concert in 1986 in Montreal with the Spectrum. Our special guests were Dusty Springfield and Nona Hendrix. I don't know if you know who Nona Hendrix is, or was, or is, and she's still alive, I believe. She was part of the trio for the group called LaBelle, with Patti LaBelle.
Okay.
You remember that Voulez-vous coucher avec moi?
Yeah.
That's LaBelle, and that's Nona Hendrix. Nona wrote a lot of the songs with Carol and Kevin, a lot of the Rough Trade songs. They co-wrote a lot of songs together. And so it was appropriate, and that at the farewell concert, that she would be a special guest, as well as Dusty Springfield and some other artists as well that worked with Rough Trade over the years, and that's how all of that came together. So sort of in Toronto back in the 80s, the way people got to know you is other musicians that you played with would recommend you for other jobs and gigs. Like David Clayton Thomas. Well, a lot of the guys that were the horn players and the keyboard player, guitar player, that was part of the Blue Note house band, also played with Blood, Sweat and Tears and Anne Marie and all of these other artists. It's kind of like the pop rock side of things. And so they also recommended me to play with them for other gigs with other artists as well. So that's how it all sort of came together, that period where we're all playing with different bands and recommending each other to play gigs and concerts with different artists. And so it was a beautiful time. It was a really cool period. And then it all changed. Obviously, the industry changed, and technology changed, and the music changed. And then in the late 80s, I had a bit of an unfortunate situation where I had this robbery in my house. I lost a lot of equipment. I had a studio, and 3 months later, I ended up in a movie set, and someone saw me and offered me a job. How do you like that?
That's really unfortunate situation, but like you said, you ended up on a movie set and someone else spotted you. So
yeah, I know. And I ended up studying acting for a while, and I haven't stopped working since. The only time I stop periodically is it's self-imposed because I'm doing other things and I don't have time to study enough for auditions. But during the early 90s, that went on from 86 until the early 90s. Around 94, I had got a call for an audition. Turns out to be one of the premier, primetime Canadian-produced, Canadian-U.S. co-production of Due South. I ended up doing that show for 5 years. And that's how I ended up in that show. But it all kind of, it's always been interconnected for me. Something happens that appear to be initially bad news or bad luck or whatever it is, when in fact it was, more of a fate playing out, over time, where, this has to happen to you in order for this to happen to you. So it's been like that for me for many, many years. And so in many ways, it's been a blessing and a curse. Mostly blessings, though. So I'm thankful for that.
Nice. Very good story.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go back. I know you went to 94. We're going to go back a few years. So my mom was always a big soap opera fan. And
yes.
I noticed that in 1986, you played Senator Jack Conroy on the hit Guiding Light. How did you land that role, and what was that experience like?
That doesn't sound like me. Are you getting that from IMDb? Because there may be a few IMDb credits that is confused. Let me just pull up my IMDb here. What show was that you talking about?
Guiding Light.
No, that was not.
That
I don't know. That is not me. That credit got on there, and I think, it's still on there. I have never done soap opera.
Oh, okay.
My first job as an actor was Suspect in 1980. Well, prior to that was John Green's Christmas. But that was the first movie I've done. That was Cher and Dennis Quaid. So that credit and everything after that, all mine. These credits below here got on there, and IMDb don't always check their sources, I guess. I mean, there's one here from 1952. I wasn't alive in 1952. I was a kid in 1965, and I was all but before my first gig as a steel pan player in Trinidad in 1970. But so it didn't start until late 80s for me, 86, 87. And so Suspect and beyond 1987 are all my credits. These are errors, these 5 credits here. Everything else is on the money, all the way up to my recent thing this year, Titans, TV series, In the Shadow of the Moon, which is a Netflix movie on Netflix, as well as A Veteran's Christmas in 2018, 2019. So there you go.
All right. So I'm sorry about that.
Sorry to burst your bubble in that one.
Oh, no problem. I'm glad we were able to help clear that up for any of our listeners, too, that might be reading that, too.
Yes, exactly. The self-credits are good. Ride Forever, and all of the other commercial credits and things like that are all there. But these 5 credits, and I think my agent tried to get those things removed. There's a way to go on and get them removed, but I'm not sure it worked. Clearly it hasn't worked. But there's another Tony Craig, who is a producer and actor, but I'm not even sure he's still alive. I think that may be where that started. But pretty much everything after that is all me.
Okay. So in 1997 and 1998, you co-hosted the Edmonton Black Achievement Awards and the African Canadian Achievement Awards. Can you tell us what that experience was like?
Well, the people who produced it, I think was Joan Pierre, I think it might be. Because Due South was such a high-profile show and was well known in the country and the city, and they needed people who were in the media to host. And they got Tracy Melcher from City TV, and they flew us out to Edmonton and to host it. And then we came back here and did the same thing at the Maurier Center, downtown Toronto on the harbour front. The funny thing is that honestly, it was fun and all of that. But what I actually remembered from that is Tracy and I are on the plane flying back from Edmonton, and having a few drinks and chit-chatting and joking around in the plane. And she says, "Tony, that was fun." And I have to say, officially, you don't suck as a co-host. I swear to God, she said that to me. You talked to her today, she remember that. I couldn't stop laughing. She said, you don't suck. Or you didn't suck. Or you don't suck. We had a good laugh about that. Yeah, she was. It was a good slang thing to say at the time, I guess. Right? As opposed to saying, "Hey, you were great," you don't suck.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was nice. It was a nice, thing to do, and it's nice to have that in your resume that you were able to do that. And you had a lot of study you have to do in terms of the whole thing was scripted for the most part and all of that, much like most award shows. It was fun.
Nice. So I know you best, as you've mentioned, from Due South,
Yes.
where you played Detective Jack Huey. How
That's
did
right.
you land that role, and what was it like being on that set?
What was it like being on the set? It was kind of surreal for me, to be honest with you, because as you know, I came from a musical background. I did work from '86 all the way up to the early '90s. And I, for the most of the shows, if you look at a lot of these credits, I never done a series before. And series is a little different than meaning a regular in a series, right? I've done other series like Tech War and what had I done prior to that? Catwalk, Secret Service, Top Cops, and all those shows. I don't know if you remember those shows. But when you're doing major series as a regular, it's kind of a different animal. And what they look for is consistency, and can you study up on short notice with a script and show up the next day and do a scene, that sort of thing. And so, it was just another audition, like others. Alliance headquarters here in Toronto, Young and Davenport, I think it was at the time. So I showed up, I got the sides and showed up for the audition. I studied, I showed up, and every black actor in the city and around the country was there. I thought, whoa. A lot of them, some of them I knew, a lot of them I really was not that familiar with because they've been in the business for years prior to me, and they all know me as a musician, and I'd done, I worked for 4 or 5 years prior to that, but, I hadn't done anything permanently big, right, if that's the term. So I showed up, I did my thing, I left. And apparently, what happened was I was told by my agent after I got the job, that I had gotten that role on the very first audition. That never happened. Actually, it happened once before. My very first job, I'll tell you about that in a minute. And so they were looking for a certain type of character. Apparently, NYPD Blue was the big show at that time. And I'm not sure if you remember, I can't remember the character's name, but James McDaniel was the cop that character on NYPD Blue. They were trying to model my character after. Well-dressed, well-spoken, suave, handsome sort of guy. and the question is, could he act, right?
Yeah.
Question was, to them, I guess. And so what happened was, a week later, I got another call back to do a, follow-up, go down to the studio, and do a follow-up audition. And then a few days later, I got another call back to do another follow-up, the same audition. Then another one, and another one. And after a while, my agent said, that's it, no more. That's Sandy Newton, by the way. She's a no-nonsense sort of, That's it, no more. If you want him, and so they decided to take me, to give me the gig. But apparently what was happening is they were screen testing me 4, 5, 6 times. It's nobody, get 2 or 3 auditions, but that's it. But the whole point is I hadn't done series before, and they wanted to see how consistent I could be in doing scenes. And so I'd do another audition, and they would FedEx overnight to FedEx VHS at the time down to CBS in California, in Hollywood, to see if there's any changes, any improvement, if you get better, and all of these things. And so every time they did that, they would FedEx it overnight so the studio can see, you hadn't done series before, and they were testing me out, testing my durability. I'm not sure what it is, but that's kind of like what the reason for doing that. But the funny thing is that they kept giving me the same scene. Right? If you want to trip me up a bit and you wanted to do, you wanted to see different aspects of my range or whatever, give him a different scene. This was the same scene.
Oh, wow.
And what ended up happening, I just kept getting better and better and better and stronger and stronger. And apparently that was good enough for them. So, but a similar situation with regard to when I mentioned getting the job the first time, the very first job I had as an actor was showing up on a movie set, like I said, after the Robbery, and Robert Guillaume at the time was the director. He was also starring in it, and it was A Christmas Carol, but except it was an all-black cast, right? Scrooge. And it was an ABC 2-hour movie of the week for Christmas of 1997, I guess, 87. And he was looking for an actor to play him, Scrooge, at a younger age, going back, in time, and as opposed to Ghost of Christmas, present and future and all that stuff. It was Ted Lange and Alfonso Carlton from Fresh Prince. He was in it. Roscoe Lee Brown and all of these famous actors, and little old me. And so anyway, the point is I went in to do the audition, and again, every black actor in the city and around the country were there. I swear to God, true story, right? They were all there because they was a big deal. Now, most actors, you're going to do these auditions, you never get you never get a note saying this is going to be a big deal if you get it. And listen, it's another audition for a series, right?
Yeah.
Or a movie, and so you don't get advance notice of the potential of it. If you get some idea that it's big, but so you go in and you do your thing and you leave. You never think twice. You get the call. It's great. If you don't, you forget about it. Well, back in those days, you never forget about it. You were obsessed with it. Nowadays, I couldn't care less. You get it. I don't get it. Fine. Move on to the next thing. And so I showed up. Karen Hazard was the big casting agent in the city at that time. She was casting it. And remember, prior to that, I was at this location where they were shooting the previous week. And Robert saw me. He told Karen to come talk to me. He thought, I like that guy there. I want to see. I'd love to see him in that role. Find out if you ever done any acting. So he came to me and asked me. I said, yeah, I've been acting all my life. What do you need? Right? Jokingly. She says, Karen. So Karen says to me, Robert wants you to read for a role. Robert who, man? Now, remember, I was there because my girlfriend at the time, she was consulting in the movie, but they were shooting in a church, a Christmas Carol, and with a choir. Well, guess who was in the choir? Every famous local singer, Liberty Silver, Jackie Richardson, Betty Richardson, Joanne Brooke, everybody that I knew that I used to play with at the Blue Note. Talk about, I swear to God, talk about coming full circle. All the singers, both the female and male, that I knew, I used to play with the local singers. We used to do a few sets with local singers as well as the Motown people, right? All of those singers I just mentioned were all the local special guests. They were all in the damn choir. And they were recording it live as well. They had a 24-track mobile recording, blah, 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 blah. And so I showed up to hang out with my girlfriend at the time, and there's all these people that I know. So I've been hanging out with them all afternoon, shooting the breeze, but blah, blah, blah. And so he comes up, Karen comes up and asks me about doing this audition. I joked around. She said, Robert. I said, who's Robert? Who? She pointed, he was on the other side of his big church. She pointed him out to me at the time. He was wearing a beard. At the time, he hadn't shot any of his scenes yet. He was just directing. And so, Benson. Hey, Benson, how you doing? I swear to God, I did that. Screamed across the entire church, waving at Benson. Benson, he was obviously, I don't know if you remember this, but he was the lead in a groundbreaking series in the 70s as a butler for a rich family called Benson, the big show back in the 70s. Anyway, so they asked me to come the next week and read for this role to play him at a younger age. I showed up. Every black actor in the city was there. And guess who the reader was? One of my friends, Joanne Brooks, who was a singer, but back then she was dabbling in acting as well. They had her as the reader. I knew Joanne. We joked around together all the time and flirted with each other. So, and the scene was a love scene in the park with a girl. so it was like shooting fish in a barrel for me because I just did what I did naturally. I didn't know anything about acting. I mean, I was just do what I thought would be natural, right? I just completely flat and natural. And I knew Joanne, and so there was a level of comfort there. And I walked out of the audition. I was the last one to audition, and we're all walking out of this courtyard. It must have been a half a dozen of the guys were still there, walking out with Karen. And one of the guys says to Karen, "So Karen, come on, tell us, who got it? Who got the role?" And I was in front walking. They were behind me. And I can almost point. I can feel Karen's finger. She wasn't touching my back, but I can feel it. Looked around. She was pointing at me. I got the role.
Oh, nice.
Now, if you know anything about the business at all, that never happens. You do the audition, you leave, and days later, a week later, even months later, in some cases, your agent will call you. You got that role, you got this role, and so on and so forth. Fine. That has never happened since.
Oh, wow.
Other than when I did do South, when I went to do that audition, I didn't know it at the time until well after. But the minute I did my first audition, I had gotten the role. They just needed to prove that I was worthy of it, and that's why they had me come back over and over and over and keep sending the tapes to the studio in California. So there you go. It all came full circle, and it all ties in together. How bizarre is that stuff?
That's a very cool story.
Yeah, it's true. It's all true. It's all true.
So there's this one scene in Due South that my husband and I were watching from season 3. And it's the episode where you were having a party for Detective Vecchio's birthday. And Constable Fraser had set up Inuit games. And one of the games was Kick the Cabbage. We were wondering, did you volunteer to be the one to kick the cabbage? Or
I'm trying to remember the scene. Was I in the scene?
You were. You were the one. You actually ran up and jumped into the air to try and kick the cabbage that was hanging from the ceiling.
Oh, and I fell down. I fell out of frame?
Yeah.
Yes. I think I did. And they had, I think, a mattress or something. And if I'm wrong, if I remember the scene, I did so many of these. I think I remember where the idea was: you jump up, you kick it. I miss, right?
Yeah.
My foot misses the cabbage, and I fall out of frame, and the camera stays still.
You were close.
Was I?
You were very close.
I remember something like that. I mean, it was so long ago, so many of those scenes. But yeah, I would have, either I volunteered or it was written for me. There one scene that I remember, I can't remember which episode it was, where we're in the bullpen doing interviews, and me and Louis doing interviews, interviewing a perp and Fraser and Vecchio. Go back and forth and something like, I can't remember what it was, but the whole idea was we got into the hallway and we finally nailed the perp and we got him to confess or whatever. We were on one side looking in because we were originally interrogating the suspect. Then they went in and we went in the other room looking through the two-way mirror, and as they came out, we also came out of the room, and I'm supposed to walk by and high-five Fraser, right?
Okay.
And so he's coming towards me. I'm going towards him. We're supposed to high five. And it was a spur of the moment thing. He kind of faked me, and instead of high fiving, I missed, and I kind of stumbled, and they thought it was hilarious. It was funny, so they went back and redid the scene where I tried to high five him, I missed, and I went down out of frame.
Oh no!
But we had a number of things like with physical comedy, which was kind of cool. We didn't get a lot of it. It was mostly about Fraser and Ray. Obviously, they were the leads, but we had a number, and a lot of stuff we did never actually made the cut. A lot of funny things and physical comedy things we did, but most of them were in the spur of the moment, and the director would indulge us and well, let's try this, let's try that, and do physical comedy, goofy things. But some of it made the cut very short, few second sort of shots, and some of it never made it. But I actually enjoy that kind of silly, goofy, physical comedy stuff.
I think that's why I like the show so much, is because it was a serious show, but then you had those moments of a little bit of comedy relief.
Well, that's what it is. It's comedy adventure, drama, comedy, drama, adventure. But a lot of it with that Fraser character, where he was this sort of eccentric sort of what's the term I'm looking for? Almost it had these unique qualities about him that was odd, sort of oddball things, right? He would do like you would pick up something in the road, looking for evidence, and taste it, in the middle of the road, but only he could get away with that. And so, because of a lot of these characteristics that his character had, it gave license to everyone else to sort of chip in and do odd, silly, goofy things, and it was okay. And then we'd get back to the serious stuff, But we'd have these moments, and those were fun. I have to admit, those were fun. And most of them were not scripted. They were spur of the moment things that happened, and the director would indulge, and some of it would make the cut, some of it wouldn't. So there you go.
And before we get off the due south, your fellow man there, Tom Alessi, I have him coming on Sunday, and while I was talking to him, he wanted me to let you know that he has finally stopped missing you.
Yeah, right. You never stop missing you. You never stop missing me. He loved that goofy stuff, Tom. And when he comes in your show, one of the questions you need to ask him was, "So, Tom," and then just blurt out of the blue, out of context, "Skillet." Just say it. He will get it. It's sort of an inside joke. Almost like that. He's a very active guy mentally. Particularly when he's off his meds. So, and so that was a bit of an inside private joke with Paul Gross and all the other actors. One day we had this discussion and off camera while we were waiting for the scene to be set up a lit or something, and we're having this interesting conversation. I don't remember what it was, and out of the blue, Tom was like, "Yeah, Skillet." Everybody looked at him and thought, "What the," and he just needed to weigh in on something. It doesn't have to be meaningful sometimes because he thinks it might get a laugh. And he's goofy like that. So yeah, tell him I say that.
I will. You guys on the show had such great chemistry together.
We did more than I did with Danielle Cash. Yes, that is true. Because Tom was he's very inclusive, and he's very enthusiastic about things, and he wants to contribute. And even though they didn't write as much as for us as we wanted them to, but then again, we're supporting cast. We wanted the leads, right? Which was fine, I didn't care that. They paid me a lot of money, so whatever. So, but he's, unlike Daniel Cash, he was very he still is today with fans. They would still have do South conventions. They come here to Toronto every year. They've been coming for like 20 years, and he's in there with the Q&As and the dinners and the things and the autograph signing and he's very involved in Facebook and all of that with all of these fans and stuff. So he's always been like that. It's part of his personality. Daniel was the opposite of that. The first Huey, Dewey, I should say, character. He is very much the opposite of that. He was kind of like, hey, I'm a serious actor, and I don't think this South thing, they're not writing enough for us. And I want off this show. So they wrote him off. Making a ton of money, and you weren't hired as the lead, you were hired as supporting cast. But he felt that he wanted more success, and the money wasn't enough, and the notoriety wasn't enough. He wanted them to write more for us, and for the most part, I supported that. Who would I have doesn't, right, or wouldn't? But it was, for me, I was thrown into this thing. I'd done day work before, 2 days here, 3 days here, in different series and shows and stuff like that. I hadn't done series, and so my experience was limited doing series, and so I wanted the experience, and I wanted to make the most out of it. But he's been, I guess, an actor all his life, and he felt it was beneath him to do the show because they weren't writing enough for us, and no matter how much money they threw at him, it wasn't enough. And so he wanted off the show, and so they wrote him off the show, and they got Tom. There you go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I was just wondering, do you have any new projects that you're working on right now?
Not currently, other than the three I just told you about, which were done. They were all on in Shadow of the Moon, and so they were all released in 2019, shot in late 2018, which was Titans, the TV series for DC. Is it DC? Yeah. Comics. And in The Shadow of the Moon, that's on Netflix right now. They play Sergeant Williams. And A Veteran's Christmas. I play it's a small role to drive all the way up to, they drove me all the way up to North Bay for 2 days to do that. I play a priest, a Reverend Terry. There you go.
Okay.
So those are the three things that were released this year. But they were all shot almost a year ago.
Okay.
Nothing current other than my other business that I'm doing. I don't mix that with this stuff, so I won't talk about that. But I do run a small marketing firm that I'm responsible for. And that's my side gig, my day gig
Nice.
these days.
It's always good to have something like that.
Yeah.
All right, so
All good.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's all good.
Okay. I just wanted to say before we let you go today, is there anyone you would like to give thanks to or shout outs? And if you could, your social media handles, that way our listeners could keep track and, follow your journey.
Thanks. And my dear departed mother that died in 1994. She's the reason for all of this, to be honest with you. She's the one that supported me the most. And I know it sounds a little cliche, but, I've been very blessed. And so, and she's, even in her passing, in the death, I believe she still watches over me and guides me. And any success I have, she still has a hand in it, believe it or not. I truly believe that, by the way. I'm not just saying that. But, I would leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I wanted to say, Tony, thank you very much for this opportunity and for coming on and letting me do an interview with you. I greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and it was very nice of you folks to request that I do this, and I still have an interest in the show and my career and all of that stuff, and that's always nice. I've never been one to sort of pursue all of the media stuff and the interviews, and never did, and so usually this is how it happens, where people request, and so I appreciate it, and it was my pleasure to spend the time with you, and I hope to tune in to your show, and in fact, I will tune into your show now that I know that what is it called? Outlaw Radio.
Yes.
In Ottawa. Is it in Ottawa? You're located in Ottawa, right?
In Prescott.
Prescott, yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much again, Tony.
You're very welcome.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, you too.